Hey now, Brawlers, it's time for another Board Game Brawl review with Nick Minahan, sponsored by BoardGameBliss.com.
Today we're going to take a look at expansion number 3, the newest one for Darkest Night, one of my favorite cooperative games from Victory Point Games. This one's called From the Abyss. It adds 4 new characters. It adds an optional deck of cards you can use in place of the standard nasty events that happen as the darkness track gets too high. If you're not familiar with Darkest Night, it's a great cooperative game. It's got a fantastic theme. It's kind of killed Pandemic for me at this point, but in any event, there's the expansions that have come out for it so far. The first one being With an Inner Light, and the second one being On Shifting Winds, have been great. In fact, really, With an Inner Light is almost required if you enjoy Darkest Night. But does this expansion hold up to the standards of those two, or up to the bar that those two set? Let's go ahead and take a look, then we're going to come back and I'll give you my final thoughts. Alright, so this is all the stuff that comes in the From the Abyss expansion number 3 for Darkest Night. You have 4 brand new characters and, of course, their set of tactic power cards. You have 5 new event cards. You have, I believe, 10 new artifact cards. And you have a stack of darkness cards. Now, these are the new mechanism, I should get that right, that comes in this expansion. Every expansion tries to change something up a little bit. And how this one works, if you recall, I'm assuming if you watch this, you at least know something about Darkest Night or have watched my review of it. There is a track at the bottom of the board in Darkest Night that, as the darkness track goes up, things get worse and worse for our heroes at set intervals. And it's always the same if you're playing the game in the normal way. With the darkness cards, every time you hit one of those intervals, and you can change when this happens, you essentially ignore what's on the board, the negative things that happen to the heroes, and instead you draw one of these random darkness cards, and that card will stay in play until it says otherwise or for the rest of the game. And it's a negative effect that you'll have to deal with. It's supposed to be as difficult as the standard stuff on the board. I have found that to be more or less the case, sometimes not. Let's take a look at a few of those right now just to give you a taste of what you might be in for if you choose to play it this way. And you can adjust the difficulty with these if you want by having them happen more or less often. So you have cards like Baleful Aura. Heroes at the Necromancer's location roll -1 die on all rolls to a minimum of 1. The All-Seeing Eye. Heroes at the Necromancer's location combat him instead of drawing an event, even if their secrecy is not 0. They still lose the secrecy at the start of their turn as normal, so the Necromancer can just always attack you. The Soul Leech. If a hero fails a combat against a Necromancer without rolling a 5 or higher, they do not suffer a wound, but instead create a new blight at the Necromancer's location. I find that to be much more difficult. And the last one I'll show you, there's a lot of these, but the last one I'll show you for now is Shatter Hope. The heroes immediately discard a holy relic they have recovered. That's just brutal. If they have not yet recovered a relic, they discard the first one they recover. Place a discarded relic on that card. So you're always going to lose one no matter what. So those are an example of some of the darkness cards. Let me show you just a few of the new artifacts, which don't really change the game mechanics anyway, but just more extra cool stuff to add to your artifact deck. The Blade of Light. When you're fighting or eluding the Necromancer, you can roll a number of additional dice equal to the number of blights in your location. The Void Armor. You may choose not to be detected by the Necromancer, and you may ignore the effects of being in his location. Prophecy. If you roll a die when searching, you may choose any location search result from the map card you draw with that success. Spear of Darkness. You may gain 1 secrecy up to 7 whenever you roll 2 successes on a single fight or elude roll. So those are just some of the artifacts. And I'll go ahead and show you all 5, since there's only 5 of them, of the event cards. You have Rescue, which is a 5 strength and 5 if you want to fight it, and 4 if you want to elude it. If you win, you gain a health, and if you fail, the darkness track goes up by 1. I hate that. Shadow Sight, which is even worse with the darkness cards, by the way. Shadow Sight, you roll a die and pick 1. 5 or 6, you lose a health, a grace. I keep getting that wrong, grace. Then look at the top card of any deck and put it on the top or bottom. 3 or 4, lose 1 secrecy, then roll 2 dice and choose one for the Necromancer's next move roll. Or 1 and 2, you exhaust a power, which is almost always worse. Sleeping Pollen, refresh all your powers, spend 1 secrecy, or draw 2 more events. The Dream Eater, 5 to fight, 4 to elude. Failure, create a blight. That's nasty. And the Jinx, spend 1 grace or turn all dice you roll into 1s and ignore rerolls for the rest of the turn. That is quite the Jinx. Then, of course, you have the characters. Every expansion comes with, I think it's 4 for all of them, right? Every expansion has 4 characters. In this case, you have the Valkyrie, the Channeler, the Exorcist, and the Mesmer. Let's talk about the Mesmer's powers first. The Mesmer is all about trickery and either using the powers of your allies or opponents or manipulating them in some way. So borrowed memory. You can activate on a power of a hero in your location. You may use that tactic and bonus effects from that power as if it was yours. You have suggestion. As an action, you can move a hero at your location to an adjacent location, or a hero at an adjacent location to your location, and that hero gains a secrecy. And last one I'll show you is Consume Dreams. As a tactic, you can fight with 3 dice, but you exhaust it if you roll fewer than 2 successes. The Exorcist we'll look at next. The Exorcist has abilities that may activate automatically at the start of your turn or not. So at the start of your turn, make a single roll of 2 dice for all your boons. Activate if any die rolls a 4. So every boon card is going to be like this, except it'll have a different activation number. So the protective boon, when it's active, if that happens, if you roll a 4, you can deactivate it after making a die roll to ignore its consequences. Whereas the courageous boon, you need a 5 in order to activate it, and you can deactivate it at the start of your turn for +1 dice on all rolls for that turn. And then I'll show you his Banish tactic. You can fight with 2 dice when attacking a Blight or the Necromancer and re-roll all 1s. So then we'll look at the Channeler. I'm not doing this in any particular order. The Channeler has this Astral Surge card. You can exhaust it at any time, and until your next turn you get +1 dice on all your rolls, and your powers have their astral effect instead of their normal effect. So Diffraction says that you can add 1 to your highest die when searching, but that's only if it's normal. If it's astral, you can ignore the Blight's effects. Whereas Transcendence says for normal, you can gain 1 grace up to default and refresh your powers, or you can exhaust it if you're in astral form to gain 2 grace up to 7 and 2 secrecy up to 7. And I'll kind of talk about this in my final thoughts, but while normally the astral is a bit better objectively, you may sometimes prefer to use the normal abilities, but that's where you have to decide whether or not you're actually going to go ahead with your Astral Surge or not, because once you do, you always are locked in to that other, the astral ability. So the last one we'll look at is the Valkyrie. She has wings, of course, because she's a Valkyrie. She can sprout wings, action, you can activate it and lose a secrecy, so deactivate and move to any location as a free action. Vigorous Spirit, all heroes have +1 to default grace and always gain a minimum of 1 grace up to default when praying. And this one I just think is great. When any hero dies, they may lose a turn instead. So those are just some of the new power and tactic cards that come for the new heroes in From the Abyss. Like I said, new darkness cards, new artifacts, and some new event cards as well. That's the new expansion for Darkest Night. Let's get to my final thoughts. From the Abyss is a great expansion. I didn't really expect it to be anything different. You've got 4 new characters, so right then and there, that justifies it, because one of the things I love the most about Darkest Night is the characters. That is really, to me, the selling point. And I mentioned in my intro how this game kind of killed Pandemic. That is one of the huge reasons why, because every character feels so fleshed out with their own deck of cards and their own fantastic artwork and like little backstory, or not really backstory, but kind of like what their character is all about and what they do. All of that together really makes you feel different from all the other players and what they can do. And if you in that regard, it makes the game more thematic. I'm not saying this is like a role-playing game, but certainly it can be fleshed out to be similar to one story-wise, because you have such a strong foundation with the different characters. And so just if it was just that in this newest expansion, that would be well enough. But you do also have the optional darkness cards, which they're fine. They're good. I would probably, if you get this expansion, I would probably always play with them, because why not? It adds a little bit of variety to what these normal nasty darkness events are that are coming up. But I don't think that they're strictly necessary. The book says that they make the difficulty for them sort of even. So if you do it the way that they suggest and how you have them come out, and so it evens out to what the normal nasty effects of the darkness track would be. I think that it's probably a little bit harder with the cards, though, just because of the randomosity of it. Is that a real word? But nevertheless, it's not a huge deal. So you can kind of take or leave it, but I think it's neat just to have more variety. As far as what the individual characters are and what they do, I think my least favorite is probably the Exorcist, but it's not like it's a bad character. I just don't think the whole idea of him is being able to randomly activate your powers, or some of the boons that he has every round, and that's just not like entirely fascinating to me. But it's okay. The Channeler is very interesting with her astral power, and how you can activate it and potentially get better versions of the powers that you already have, but sometimes you don't even want to do that, which leads to some interesting decision making. I get this really awesome power on this tactic card if I activate my astral form now, or going astral, whatever it's called. But in order to do that, the power on this card is less useful to me right now. So that can feel a little bit more chaotic, but it's really not. It's really just leads to some interesting decisions to be made, so I really like that character. And it's just so unique from everything else in the game. The Valkyrie is more straightforward, and I feel like it's a character that there's a lot of different archetypes of that character in the game already, but she's still really cool. I love the sprout wings thing, and I love the fact that she kind of gives up secrecy in order to be more powerful and to help the other players, but that's fine. That, you know, sometimes you need a tank like that, and that's kind of where I would put her. The Mesmer is also really interesting, being able to manipulate the his or her, I guess, opponents, or not opponents, but allies, and just has a bevy of really cool powers. So I think that all the characters, maybe not the Exorcist, are pretty neat. I do think that the Darkness track is a neat idea. There's really nothing else that's that new or unique about this expansion, which probably makes it the least essential of the 3 expansions, because the essential purchase there is with an Inner Light, the first expansion, because of the questing deck, which is just amazing. It adds a whole new dynamic to the game, and I would always recommend playing with that if you have it. And then the second expansion on Shifting Winds, it's tough to say these names sometimes, on Shifting Winds really just adds more and more stuff to the game, more characters, more blights, more of the other deck cards. And kind of enhances the first expansion even. So that makes it probably the secondary purchase. So, which makes sense, 1, 2, and 3. So this is the least essential, but that doesn't mean it's bad by any means. This is a fantastic game, and I will always take more content from it. I was fantasizing the other day that if I ever started my own board game publishing company, it's not happening, then I would want to re-release this. I would want to pair up with Victory Point Games and like do a Kickstarter version of Darkest Night that's like amazing with miniatures and just like really pimped out components, because yes, this expansion continues the trend of Victory Point Games components not being all that great. But still, this is a fantastic game. I wish more people took notice of it, and I'll take whatever I can get for it. And this expansion, while not the best of the 3, is still very, very solid. That is From the Abyss, the 3rd expansion for Darkest Night.
Thanks for watching. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Patreon. And make sure to check out our sponsor, Board Game Bliss, where you can find an amazing selection of games from around the world. BoardGameBliss.com. Thanks for your support.